The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery and a mysterious world we're in. And, of course, I'm Al Warren. Joe Goldberg is co-hosting on this one today.
Hello, sir. Hope you're doing well.
Well, you know, I'm surviving. It's been 3 weeks. I still can't smell and taste very much. But there you go.
You'll get better. We all hope. But you do smell. I don't even touch it. I couldn't let it go. You do smell.
Oh no. Well, I can't smell. I can't smell it if I am. So there you go.
That's true.
You know, I even tried the really loud colognes just to make sure, and still nothing. So I don't know. Maybe it's a good thing.
Yeah, the people around you know.
Yeah. Well, today we're talking about thriller and mystery, detective, action, all that stuff. And we've got a writer. His latest book is called Racing the Light, and it's an Elvis Cole and Joe Pike novel, and it's number 19 in the series. Wow. So, Mr. Robert Crais, thank you for being here.
It's terrific to be here. Thanks a lot for having me.
First thing, you've written a lot of books. Now, and I know I guess you started in more of a writing in the TV career, like you were doing Cagney and Lacey and shows like that. What made you decide to jump over into doing a novel rather than TV writing?
I have always wanted to write novels. And before I wrote television, I started writing short stories, and that was my babyhood as a writer. So I have a long history with prose, and then I got into television. I very much wanted to write TV and films, and I worked for about 10 or 12 years exclusively in television. Had the opportunity to work on some just fabulous series like Hill Street Blues, Cagney and Lacey, Miami Vice, on and on. But after a while, the original dream returned. I wanted to go back to my roots. I wanted to create my own detective character because I was a huge fan of crime fiction. And so I did. I transitioned myself out of television. All my TV friends thought I was crazy. And set about teaching myself to write novels, and eventually published my first book, which was The Monkey's Raincoat.
So you did short stories, and then you did television, and now you're doing books. And the obvious question is, what's the difference in the process and the way you write from succinct short stories to television, which is a group of people,
right?
And then,
though there's a lot of similarity, of course, the three distinct mediums and art forms. Short stories and novels are both prose, so it requires a certain artistry with the language. Television also requires an artistry with the language, but it's visual. And working in television, though, is completely different because it's a collaborative process. If you're writing on a television series the way I did, a staff writer, story editor, executive story consultant, producer, executive producer, all these different titles that we have when we do that, you're in the writer's room. So there's going to be multiple writers in there, a few producers in there. Sometimes it's a big crowd, and all of you have to work together in some way because it's collaboration. Now that can be wonderful, and a lot of terrific television gets made that way. But I found it wearing after a while, and I wanted to express my own voice, which really isn't possible in a group effort. It's the group effort that makes it to the screen. So the appeal to me was I'm going to create my characters, bring them to the page my way. And people are either going to like it or they're not going to like it, but it's going to be mine. And to this day, and now that I'm a novelist, I write novels for a living. To me, it feels like I'm Walt Disney and the books are my Disneyland. I get to do whatever I want. And that's a great creative joy.
Plus, I would guess that in television script writing for some of these series, because it's like an hour-long show, things are a little bit more formula.
Well, they are formula to a degree, and they're short. It's typically a 1 hour episode of television these days is probably, I'm going to guess, so anywhere between 48, 52 pages to make an hour, as opposed to a novel is going to be, one of my novels is probably going to be 480 to 520 manuscript pages. So, novels are a long-term project. When I was working in television and we were in production and under pressure, I would write a 60-page script in 3 or 4 days. A couple of times I even wrote them shorter periods of time than that. You can't do that with a novel. You set about writing a novel and you're in it for the long haul. You living with it for the better part of a year. So it's a major commitment. It requires much more focus. And it's much more complex to write.
When you started this series with Elvis Cole and Joe Pike, so you're at book 1 and you're starting this, did you kind of know in your mind that this was going to turn into like 19 books? Or is this sort of a totally play as you go each time you do a book?
Clueless. Never would have even dreamt it would become what it became. Honestly, the first novel I wrote, I had to write 2 novels before I wrote The Monkey's Raincoat because I was teaching myself how to write a novel. So after I left TV, I took a year off from TV and wrote a book, and it was just awful, terrible. And then I wrote another book, and it was just terrible. I mean, so bad I didn't bother to show it to anyone else. And I had to regroup and then figure out how to actually write a complete manuscript that worked, that did what I wanted to do. And at that point in my life and career, remember, I'd never done it. I was trying to solve the puzzle of doing it. And you ask now, oh, did you think there'd be 19? My goal was simply to write a complete book that wasn't too embarrassing. That was it. I just wanted to write a complete story that I enjoyed writing, that, I thought, oh, please, I could sell this somewhere, anywhere. And I didn't think beyond that. It never occurred to me that Elvis Cole would become as popular as he became, or that so many people would be my readers.
So what was so wrong with those first 2 novels you wrote that you say, like, one is so awful you didn't even show anybody, and the first one was pretty awful? So what about it that did you find that you were missing, or what was the hard thing to get going?
Remember, I was coming out of 10 years of working in television, and during that time, I think I developed a sense that, well, I knew this for a fact, that the outside world, meaning everyone out there in the greater world who wasn't involved with making the sausage, as it were, there was a kind of a disdain by the literary establishment for TV writers, that somehow television work was hack work, right? Was junk. The way we wrote TV, and they still do, is a television episode or a movie, all the scenes, the action, everything's figured out beforehand. It's someone comes up with the concept for a story, has to pitch that story to a buyer, producer, whoever. Then an outline is written, and then finally, if the outline is approved with some changes, no doubt, a script is written. So it's all very, there's a paint by the numbers aspect to it. Now, I say that, and of course, the mechanics of it are still true today, but, marvelous, beautiful, wonderful, creative stories are written that way too. But so I was coming out of TV, and I thought I managed to convince myself that, okay, all this script work that I've done, Obviously, there's an element of hack work to it because I'd figured everything out. I'd outlined that's the way we did things. So I convinced myself that a true artist, a true artist doesn't write like that. A true artist just sort of sits down at the typewriter with a blank page, and you go into a sort of a trance-like state. Your eyes roll back in your head, and you start to type and type and type, and the story just comes out. And then finally, when you come out of your fugue state, you've typed the end, and here's this wonderful story. So when I wrote the first book, I said, I'm not going to outline, figure things out the way I've been doing for 10 years with TV work. I'm just going to sit down, blank page, start writing and see what happens. Well, what happened was I wrote a 550-page manuscript. I had a 500-page beginning and a 50-page ending and no middle. There was no structure to it. There was nothing. That was me making it up as I went. So I wrote a second book, and exactly the same thing happened. And after the second strikeout, I said, Bob, you should go back to what you know works. If it's good enough for Hill Street Blues and Cagney and Lacey and Miami Vice, let's apply that to writing a book. So that was the book that became The Monkey's Raincoat, where I did the writing the way I knew how to do the writing. And damned if it didn't work.
So what's your writing structure now like? Or so you actually totally outline the book?
Yes.
Beforehand. And so how do you actually decide how you're going to do this? And I mean this in the way of like, okay, so do you set aside, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, and you sit and write at those hours, or do you have to have a certain mood in order to write? Like, how's your, let's say, your way of doing it?
Well, first I have to be sober.
Always a good start.
This is a good start. Yeah. I'm a professional writer. I don't sit around and wait for inspiration, the muse. If I can sit there forever. The muse is on the beach in Maui working on her tan. I mean, she's, I'm very rigorous and disciplined. I guess that was a gift from my television days also. When it's time to write, you go in your room, you sit down and you write. Now, let me be clear. That doesn't mean you sit down and you immediately start typing out the narrative and, 3,000 words later, you get up into the day. Whatever whatever it takes you to get those words on the page, the important thing, the disciplined thing is you must sit there and try to do it. And I do. I do it every day. I write every day. The hours per day vary, but I write every day because it's a job. By the way, I have to say also, I love to do it. It beats many other choices I could make. So I enjoy being in this room where I am now, sitting at my desk and working, thinking, coming up with characters and funny things and exciting things and dangerous things and whatever it is. Again, it's that sort of inner landscape that's my Disneyland, and I get to play in it. What I mean by outlining, just as an example, and they vary. My books vary in the time they take. But let's just say it takes a year to write a book. So probably the first 4 months of that is me outlining. And outlining to me doesn't mean I sit down with a pad and I write, okay, put the number 1 dash, chapter 1. Woman walks into Elvis's office and hires him. 2, chapter 2. Elvis gets up and drives across the city to interview somebody. It's not like that. The first for me is always the characters. I don't have a story unless I have that character who drives the story, that person who I want to write about. And sometimes in a specific story, that'll be Elvis Cole, or sometimes it'll be his partner, Joe Pike, or sometimes it'll be, I refer to them as guest characters, but it'll be the main driving force character who Elvis meets or who hires Elvis or whatever. And they have a story that I find so compelling that I want to spend the next year of my life with them. And once I have that character, the character actually will give me a direction for the story. Like, what kind of jam are they going to be in? What's going to be their problem? And then I start spitballing other characters. And then I come up with scene ideas and story ideas. And by the way, none of this is linear. During that 4-month period, certainly at the beginning, I actually think of it as kind of global. It could fit anywhere. And I'm writing all this stuff down, right? I'm keeping notes. I sit at my laptop or sometimes my pad with a pen, and I'm jotting down all these gazillions of ideas, the majority of which will never make it in the book. But little by little, the scenes come together, and the story arc comes together. And yes, sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and really, grind it, try to work it. Oh man, that's not working. How can I do this other thing? But probably by the end of the 4 months, I have pretty much the beginning, the middle, and the end of the book. I know the ending. I may not know absolutely everything, right? There's going to be a lot of details I don't know. There'll be the missing scene. A lot of details I don't know. They come in the writing. I reach a place where I love the story of that character in the book. And I feel it's exciting and important enough for me to spend all this time with it. And I'm confident that I'm going to be able to write the book that I want to write. And that's when I actually start typing narrative.
Well, that's actually one of my traditional questions, and it's such a great answer. When you're writing a series, so you're going from book to book and you're saying, how is Elvis or Joe going to change in this book? What character things do I want to bring out? And then you fit the plot to make those changes happen. Am I getting close?
You are getting close. You're getting close. Oftentimes, the plot grows out of that change that comes to you. Racing the Light is a story of a young man who's trying to prove his worth. Now, it's more complicated than that, but that'll serve. He's trying to prove his worth, his value, both to himself, to the society at large, and most of all, to his father, his parents. Now, if I have that much, I can see a world of scenes that would serve that in, both not only for that character, the types of scenes he would be in, what I would have to depict for the reader in order to tell his story. But I also can see how Elvis Cole fits into it. My hero, the detective, who ends up, because of the nature of this beast, being the hero and the savior, of course, for this young man who's trying to reach his goal, who's trying to prove himself. That's the nature of my guys, my detectives. So it ends up, once I have that big hook, once I have the emotional thrust, and it's all about emotions for me, it really is. All of the books, every one of them. Once I have that hook, the rest, most of it, begins to lay itself out for me very, very easily. It's been that way for all the books.
How do you experience your main characters? Like, for instance, Elvis. Is this something that you experience like a movie or voices or?
You mean in my head?
Yeah. Like, what's your experience?
It's weird. It's, by the way, not just Elvis. This would apply to all my characters. I am in their heads, while at the same time, concurrently, simultaneously, I'm in their heads, and I'm an omniscient presence outside of them, watching and directing what they do. It isn't. Elvis Cole comes alive, and now he just writes the scene for me. I know a lot of writers who say that, but I mean, I understand, and this happens to me too. You're into a scene, like you're on, right? You're in it, and dialogue is flowing, and the interaction's flowing, and it can feel like the characters, now they have a life of their own, and they're doing it without you. But of course, in reality, they're not doing it without you. You the writer, but you're directing that. But again, concurrently, I'm feeling everything they feel. If and this happens often for me, there's a lot of emotion in my novels, and in every novel, have a scene that leaves people crying. Well, when I'm writing that scene, sitting here, right here, I'll be crying too. It's a very heartfelt moment. I mean, I have to be with them. I have to be, if they're feeling something that deeply, I can't write it unless I'm there, experience it also. So, again, that's all part of the process, but that's what happens.
Robert, I like your comment on emotion. And in your books, I get a sense that there's sort of this, I don't know if it's a good versus bad crusade against injustice or a crusade for justice. You mentioned the guy's trying to prove himself to his father. Am I off seeing that crusading aspect of your books, of this search for justice, good versus bad type of feeling?
Yeah, of course. Yes. I guess I have recurring themes in my books. And one is the importance of a family unit, whether we're talking, spouses and children or just a group like Elvis and Joe. They form a family unit of two. But justice is, since book one, what Elvis delivers. Elvis is not a police officer. He is Joe. He's a private investigator. And he's not there when he's solving one of his cases and bringing a bad guy to justice. He's not there to follow black letter law and build a case for a district attorney. Elvis is delivering justice for whoever his client is, who's being wronged in some way. And so that recurs for me again and again and again. He leads with his heart. And if someone is being unfairly treated or abused or victimized, that's the true crime that Elvis is solving. So again, that is something that's very important to me and makes Elvis, I think, very heroic. And I do think of these novels, I think of them in many ways, but I do think of these novels as heroic fiction. Elvis is the protagonist. Elvis is the hero. Doesn't mean he's without faults. He breaks the law all the time. But he's someone who believes in doing right, and he has a very, very well-defined sense of what's right and just.
When you have so much emotion that's involved in these characters yourself, do you find it difficult to write people that are, or characters that are evil or bad or doing awful things? I mean, because I would say that it probably coincides that you would also feel that emotion as well.
No, I do. My bad guys are part me too. I have this saying that all writers are cannibals. You cannibalize your life, your experiences, bits and pieces of yourself, and you transmogrify them into your characters. I love writing my bad guys. I find my bad guys in the main great fun to write because they allow me to touch the dark side. I do so with a distance because, of course, I don't want to be that person. But it is artistically enormous fun to create bad guys who are horrible, but at the same time delicious. And what I mean by delicious is that they're interesting and entertaining and fun for the reader, no matter how evil they are. They're serving a purpose in the story, and one of those purposes is entertaining the reader.
So, as you're creating your hero story with your bad guys, are you thinking about how your fans, your audience, your readers are responding to this world that you've created? You're writing for yourself? You're writing for your reader?
I'm writing for me. See, I'm my first reader. My philosophy since beginning of the very first book, the first Elvis Cole book, and everyone now is write. I used to have a sign. I don't have a sign in my office anymore. Write the book you want to read, and that's what I've tried to do. Every one of my books, I'm writing it because I'm the reader. I'm the first reader. I don't think of my readers in the larger sense. Of course, I'm writing. I'm thinking to myself sometimes, gee, I really hope they like it, or this. I think they'll like this, but I don't edit myself to that end. I edit myself to my reading experience. So in a way, I guess it's my good fortune that so many people, obviously, so many people share my taste in reading because they're drawn to Elvis and Joe. I try not to guess what's going to be successful with people. I don't write to that end. I never have. I don't try to concoct. To me, that would be like trying to pick stocks, right? Like, which stock should I buy? I know nothing about stocks. If I tried to live that way, I'd be broke. And I think me trying to anticipate what readers are going to like or respond to outside of very, very small, narrow parameters, it would probably be a loser for me. So I just write the stories I enjoy writing.
So when you say you like your characters or the story to be heroic, is that kind of your subtext? Like, do you intentionally put a subtext underneath the story and the entertainment, or maybe one comes out organically?
There's always a subtext. It comes organically, but again, like theme, my subtext, the things I use as a foundation, seem to recur. You know, for example, and I'm very conscious of this when I write. If I do a scene with Elvis Cole and his estranged girlfriend, Lucy Chenier, because they've been estranged for 10 books now or whatever it is. If I have a scene with them, the subtext for that scene is always, from Elvis's point of view, what it is he wants to be with her. He loves her, even though they're estranged. She is her choice to move away. Her choice is the reason they're not together. He's hanging in. He's been hanging in for years. That love for her forms his subtext. I'll give you another example. It doesn't have anything to do. If Elvis is, for example, talking to a critical parent about his son, the subtext of that scene, whether Elvis actually says the words in dialogue or not, is that Elvis actually is seeing the flaw in the parent, in that particular parent. And though he may not say it, the unfairness of the criticality imbues all his words. So for me, there's always a subtext to what I'm writing. And it's usually serious. Even when I'm writing funny scenes, it's again, because it harkens back to the emotionality of what I'm doing. I write for the emotions. Yeah, the books have a lot of action. Yeah, there's lots of funny stuff. The guys are very physical. There's a lot of, gunplay. But really what keeps me going isn't all that stuff. What keeps me going is those emotional moments where I'm the most in touch with my feelings through those characters. And all of those scenes have some kind of subtext.
Well, I guess as you get through each book, going through the emotion and the writing of each book, by 19 now, you must have changed a lot from book 1 to book 19.
Yes.
I wonder if you go back and look at book 1 or 2 and think about rewriting it.
There's a dangerous problem I have. I recently, since the pandemic broke, it's been this past 3 years, I've had occasion to go back and reread 5 or 6 of my novels, the earlier books, because honestly, I forget what's in them. So, my readers who come to my signings, they know my books way better than I do. They ask me questions about things. I got no idea what they're talking about, right? It's because I don't remember. But so I reread these books, and I just knew this about myself anyway. It's true. I really want to rewrite everything. I could go back to any of the books and just as I read it, have my blue pen, and I could just make changes. That's not to say that what I wrote was needed more editing. I think that's just my personality. I do go back. I would change things. So it's probably best that I cannot do that.
It would be an endless process.
It would, and I'd never write any new books. I'd be, here's the Here's the Monkey's Raincoat, part 17.
But Robert, there's 19 books there. What was it? The late 80s was somewhere when you started about these things?
1987.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're younger. You've changed.
A lot.
Your characters have changed. How have you incorporated the sort of your maturity into the characters in your book and in your books as you yourself have changed?
Right. I think in a couple of different ways. Yes, both the characters and I have changed. I'm not the same person I was when I wrote The Monkey's Raincoat in the mid-'80s. I probably, if I were writing it from scratch today, it would be completely different. But one of the reasons I've been able to sustain 19 books is the fact that I've changed and the fact that I see the world through different eyes has allowed the characters to stay fresh for me. And I've incorporated those differences into the books. Elvis, though still funny, there's still funny scenes in my books. I don't think Elvis is quite as, the earlier books were much, much more jokey. Now, though Elvis is still quick with a one-liner, I still write funny scenes. There's a hilarious scene in a character in Racing the Light that I absolutely loved writing, because he's funny. I use him for laugh relief. But the earlier books, a couple of which I just reread recently, it was almost like there had to be something funny in every paragraph. I don't do that anymore. I also learned, Elvis, because of the nature of his job, because of the kind of jobs that he takes, there are some topics and subjects, some situations where his humor is inappropriate. To make light of or jokes about a certain thing. Maybe I would have written that in 1990, but now if I were going to write it, I would think that just makes Elvis an asshole. He just shouldn't do that. I can be funny the next chapter, right? In the following chapter, I'll be funny. But in this chapter, in this scene, he needs to be more thoughtful and respectful. So it's, as I change, he's changed. It's inevitable. And I'm sure if I'm still around and writing, 10 books from now, we'll both be different still. He's got a great advantage over me, though. When I started writing these things, Elvis was a few years older than me. So now we're on book 19. Elvis is a lot younger than me.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Have you slowed down the time?
I did.
Space-time continuum in your books?
He did. Elvis, I just didn't want him to age. I considered it on and off earlier, like in the first third of my career, but I realized that wasn't going to work for me and the characters. So Elvis doesn't actually live in Los Angeles, where I live. Elvis lives in Elvis Cole's Los Angeles, which is sort of like a parallel universe. And I wish I lived there, because the great thing about it is he doesn't age as fast as me. He doesn't have bad knees and bad ankles and bad back and all those things. And I get constantly called on it by my readers, because unfortunately for myself, but I say unfortunately, it was right. Elvis is sort of anchored in time by the Vietnam War, right? Because I made that's Elvis and Joe were both in Vietnam, which would make him in his 70s now. Somewhere in the mid realm of my books to date, I just decided I can't have him be that age. I like the physicality of the guys. I like their attitudes. I didn't want to write scenes where Elvis's sciatica is acting up. Believe me, I don't want to curse him with that. So he's younger. It's fiction.
You have to be careful with where you place your humor in the book.
Oh yeah, I'm as I said, I'm much more conscious of that these days than when I first began. I mean, I like being funny. There's still a lot of humor in the books, but I'm very careful in my effort to not be inappropriate or insensitive with his humor. Not only his humor, but then I have other funny characters who I love to write because I like writing that. But I try to be very cognizant of that these days.
But isn't that kind of a difficult thing to do? Because, like you were saying, when you're writing something in the 80s, later 80s, what's appropriate then when you were writing and what was kind of funny is maybe not something that would be today. So even when you're writing something today, isn't that kind of something you foresee happening in the future with something?
Well, all you can do is live in the present world and react to the present world. I don't know how things are going to be 10 or 20 years from now. So the choices I make today when I'm writing, those choices are being made by a man with my sensibilities today, because I live in today's world and I grew up having the experiences that I've had up to this point in time. I'll give you actually a perfect example. We were going back to the monkey's raincoat again. And something I did then and would not do now. In the monkey's raincoat, which briefly is a mousy with a nervous woman named Ellen Lang hires Elvis Cole to find her missing husband, Mort Lang, who's an agent. So Elvis takes the job and sets about finding Mort and uncovers some really dark, shady, dangerous stuff. And Ellen and her children end up threatened, and Ellen ends up kidnapped, and all kind of horrible things happen. So there's a scene where Elvis this is a spoiler, but it was published in 1987. If you haven't read it by now, read the clip notes.
Skip it.
Just skip it. It doesn't matter. So Elvis rescues her, and then they go back to Elvis's place, his A-frame in Laurel Canyon. And, they're shattered. Ellen's shattered because she has to put her life back together. It's this big emotional, she's at this huge emotional turning point in her life. And, it's just the two of them, and it's late, and she touches him because she wants, to be comforted. And then she and Elvis make love. And, now I think I simply wouldn't have it. I wouldn't do it. It was honest, and I thought emotionally pure because it was sincere on both their parts. When I wrote it, I thought it was emotionally pure. But now I think it's a bad choice. It's a bad decision. Even though she touched him, she was in too much of a weakened state. He should have been stronger. It would have been all right for him to hold her, comforting her. But for them to go to bed is a scene that I now regret. So that's an example. It's what, 30-something, however many years it is, since Monkey. And so when I write any of my books now, whether it's Race and Light, Dangerous Man, all the more recent books, I'm writing, the guy writing them has the sensibility he has now. So there are choices that I would make that are different than earlier choices.
Well, I want to ask the normal question, but it's always important to me. It's why I ask it is inspiration, sort of the why people write. I mean, you're a Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler guy, and so am I. It just oozes that. And they were written in their time frame too.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
Those books couldn't be written now. So what else do you read outside the genre? You do nonfiction or lit fiction to get inspiration or just to clear your mind?
Yeah, well, I do. I'm a very eclectic reader and always have been. I read a lot of crime fiction for sure, different subgenres within the world of crime fiction. But I also read, again, eclectically. I read science fiction. I read literary fiction. Pretty much anything that looks interesting to me. I read, and I actually encourage, whenever I talk to aspiring writers or younger writers, I encourage them to do it, because I think you can learn from anywhere, especially if you want to be a writer. But more than learning, I think it's important to have a diversity of taste, to seek out what's good and interesting across an entire palette of colors. And I think it makes for, if you're going to look at it purely practical terms, it makes for richer writing when you write. But it's also fun for me because I enjoy it.
Does that go for movies too? Is that like Chinatown? And
Yeah, I mean, I watch. Again, I'm not limited to crime movies. I mean, I watch a lot of crime movies, and TV shows. But I'm just as likely to Game of Thrones or comedies or whatever. I just watch. If it's good, I want to watch it. If it's interesting to me, I want to watch it. It's all grist for the mill, man. It's,
right, exactly.
Especially as you hone the task of writing into a narrower point. If I'm going to write a scene between two men experience great examples and hence models for your own work by reading anything. I mean, that might appear in a romance novel, might appear in a science fiction novel, might appear in a spy thriller, might appear in a literary novel, wherever. I mean, feed it. The trough is wide. Indulge yourself.
What's next? Book 20?
Well, I am writing the 20th Elvis Cole novel. Yeah, I already started it a few months ago. So the next book, which will be the 20th Elvis Cole novel, is already in works. No, I can't tell you about it.
So you're in research phase, because you always do the big research early. Is that right? Am I wrong on that?
Well, I did the research phase already, and most of the plotting is done, and I've actually started to write scenes on it. So I'm well underway.
So now let's find out how to contact Robert. Do you do social media, website? What is your favorite contact locations?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Robert Crais. I'm on Instagram at Robert Crais, and I'm on Facebook at The Real Robert Crais.
Oh, there's a fake one out there?
There must be.
Do you run a website or not?
Yeah, robertcrais.com. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, I have that too. I'm covered.
You're covered. Well, we'll have all that up on our website as well, so people can find you with one click. Easy.
Excellent.
When listening and that. So, well, that's fascinating. How was did the pandemic get in the way of any of your writing? Because this one coming out November 1st, Terry, you must have been doing a lot of it over the crazy time. And I asked that in a sense of there was a lot of emotion and anger, let's say, feelings kind of all over the place with the last couple of years for a lot of different reasons. And I wonder if that interferes with your writing, or does it get into your writing somehow?
The pandemic crushed me. I have writer friends who literally were saying things like this to me. Man, this pandemic is great. I'm going to have 2 books out this year. I might even have 3 books out this year. For me, exactly the opposite. When the pandemic broke in the big news in January of 2020, I just literally stopped. I mean, it was like I woke up in a bad 70s dystopian science fiction movie of the week. And
Michael Crichton, don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I just had the TV on all day. I was just glued to the set. And I don't know what sort of perverse, morbid interest I had in it, but it actually felt to me like suddenly We had gone from the real world into this weird science fiction world. So I probably didn't do anything for 6 or 8 months. There were a lot of other things at play too, but that I was just totally T-boned right off the rails, and lost track of everything I was doing. And then when you add in a lot of other crazy things were happening, and those things fed into Racing the Light. In fact, before the pandemic, I had been working, and this is before A Dangerous Man came out. I had already started on what was going to be the next Elvis Cole book. And when the pandemic and the world went upside down for a lot of reasons, I actually, when I tried to get back to work, I could not pick up the thread on that other book. I just lost whatever connection I felt. And Racing the Light literally came out of the massive chaos and emotional chaos and loss of trust that was happening in the world all through that period, from conflicting news reports about COVID. Where did it come from? Was it manufactured? Is it natural? Can we cure it? Are we all going to die? Lockdowns? No lockdowns? Clashing messages from everyone. You couldn't trust anything you were hearing on the news. And into this maelstrom, of all people, the United States Navy, the official United States Navy, drops all these videos of unidentified flying objects that F-18 pilots were taking pictures of. And you have to do a double take, and you're looking at TV, like, what? Excuse me? And then they've never explained it. Now we got congressional hearings about it. And what? Well, we don't know what they are, but there they are, and our pilots are seeing them. Here in L.A., where we have city council members running our city, one after another, indicted for corruption. There was so much lying in the world, so much loss of trust in the world, that all of that led to or went into Racing the Light, went into my character, Josh Schumacher, the podcaster in Racing the Light, because Josh is a warrior for truth. And I think the pandemic and all the other craziness directly led to me creating the characters in Racing the Light. And so if anything good came out of it, at least I got this book out of it, because that's what I'm writing about. What's true, what isn't true, who are the people who are lying to us, and someone needs to expose those people. And that would be Elvis Cole and Josh Schumacher.
Well, it's too bad they weren't here in the real world.
We could use them.
Yeah, we could use them. Jeez. Well, this has been a real pleasure talking to you. Of course, everyone get out and get this book. It's the new Elvis Cole book, Racing the Light. And it's Robert Crais. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Joe.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.